Now we're talking to Eamon McPartlin, who is the founder, chairperson and director with FND Ireland. You're very welcome to Disability Matters.
Thank you, John, and thanks for the invite to join the show, and good to chat to you and say hello to your listeners.
It's our pleasure to host you. So you might start, if you will, by telling us a bit about FND, the symptoms, and how it affects the person who suffers from it.
Thank you, John. So, functional neurological disorder, which is known as FND, is a condition that can present with lots of different neurological symptoms. And they occur due to a problem with how the brain and body send and receive signals. So FND symptoms can vary from person to person. They can include functional weakness and tremors. They can cause sensory and cognitive issues. For some people, they can have functional seizures, would be very similar to epileptic seizures to the layperson, but are caused by a different mechanism. And they also would have potentially speech and swallowing difficulties.
Oh, that's fairly severe.
It can be, John, for some people.
Okay.
The one thing I suppose about FND is, as I mentioned earlier, it varies from person to person.
Okay.
So my own experience of FND is I live what we call the motor version of FND, which affects my movement. So I don't experience functional seizures. And some people can only experience functional seizures. So to many, it's an invisible disability. You know, they basically have seizures, but for someone meeting them, they would not look to have a disability caused by their neurological condition. And then for others, it can be more complex, and that they can have a number of those symptoms together. And that's where it can be more complex or severe.
The invisible disability, that's very, very true for a lot of disabilities.
For sure, John. And that's something that comes up probably time and time again with those that have FND, because another part of FND is that symptoms may wax and wane, as they say. So in other words, they may not be as severe every day for some people. So some people, their walk may be better on certain times, and then it's very hard to explain that, even to family and friends, how a condition can impact someone differently, maybe over a period of time. So I agree with you that the challenge of living with symptoms, you know what I mean, let's say, that would lead to an invisible disability can be very challenging.
What about the amount of people who suffer from it and the gender split?
So the amount of people that have FND in Ireland, we estimate to be 9,000 people. So it's a large number of people. It's as common as MS. We know this based on research in the UK. We don't have as much research in Ireland as we should, but we're able to interpolate this in figures from work that was done very intensively in Scotland, which would have a slightly larger population than Ireland. And the other thing, I suppose, just to note in relation to gender split, typically FND affects 3 times more women than men. And the other interesting thing, I suppose, with FND compared to many neurological conditions, it tends to occur at a relatively young age. So in the main, it affects a young working age population, and that would be people in their 20s and 30s, but it's becoming increasingly diagnosed in teenagers.
Is it expensive to treat it, with the cost of drugs and so on?
Now, the interesting thing about FND is that there's no real drug or medication that has a major benefit for the condition as a whole. There can be certain drugs that may treat symptoms, but unfortunately, compared to maybe some other neurological conditions where there is specific medication that will treat the condition as a whole, there isn't that in the case of FND. So really the treatment for FND is what we call the gold star treatment, would be multidisciplinary treatment by a team of professionals that would include a physiotherapist, it could include a psychologist, an occupational therapist, a speech and language therapist for someone, and it's getting a team to work with a patient for the best outcome.
So basically, it's a treatment for all the symptoms, but not for the condition.
Unfortunately, yes. So if you compare one, we'll say, of those symptoms, functional seizures to epilepsy. Epilepsy, you've got medication that you can take for your epileptic seizures, but with functional seizures, which many people call them non-epileptic seizures, unfortunately, medication does not help. The reality is some people may be misdiagnosed or given epilepsy medication initially, and it actually generally makes their seizures worse. There may be some cases where certain medication may have some input into a benefit in relation to symptoms, but unfortunately there's no overall medication that works.
You're a sufferer of FND yourself, would that be right, Sam?
That's right, John. So I live with the motor version of FND and also another neurological condition called dystonia. And dystonia would be a relatively rare neurological condition, but probably would still be more heard of than functional neurological disorder, FND, even though FND is 3 times more common. So I live with the motor version of FND, and everyone's journey with FND is a little bit different. I know myself, when I look back, that I had some mild FND symptoms in my 30s, which would be the typical age of onset of motor FND, I found out after. And these affected my movement in that I may have hesitation sitting down, or it could be taking a step in the stairs, and then gradually they start moving to affect me walk, in that I found it very difficult to turn. I could walk pretty good in a straight line pattern. And the interesting thing is what I got to find out, John, in relation to my own experience living with another neurological dystonia, which affects my head and neck, which I do get injections every 3 months, which are very beneficial, is that about 1/4 of those that live with FND also live with another neurological condition. So it coexists many times with other neurological conditions and even other medical conditions.
And do you remember your first diagnosis?
I do, because it took a long time, John, for me to get diagnosed. So basically, I originally was diagnosed with dystonia back in early 2017, but even that was a journey to get to the right team. And my team are based in St Vincent's Hospital in Dublin. So I was very fortunate to get to the dystonia clinic and get support there. The challenge with the FND part, sometimes, and for a lot of people, this can be the case, FND can mimic, for want of a better word, other neurological symptoms. So in my case, my movement issues were very similar to Parkinson's. I had that hesitation, that slowness of turning, kind of freezing. And initially they thought it was some atypical Parkinson's features I have, because when I went and got all the scans, they came back normal. There was nothing shown, or they were borderline abnormal, but nothing to show that I would be developing Parkinson's, with the exception I have one of the Parkinson's genes. So that may mean I may get Parkinson's in the future. But the interesting thing was I had to go to London to get diagnosed, and I was fortunate to get to London through the Treatment Abroad scheme. But it would have took me 4 years. So 2021 is when I got diagnosed with the motor element of FND. So it took me 4 years from my original diagnosis with dystonia before I got the FND diagnosis as well.
And when you went for the diagnosis, when you in the lead up to the diagnosis, what did you believe was wrong?
The truth is, I'll be very honest, way back in the beginning, before I even got diagnosed with dystonia, and I went to the first neurologist back in the beginning of 2016. At that time, I was living in Galway. That's where I worked. That's where my career was. My GP thought I had certain Parkinson's features, but it wasn't, like clinical Parkinson's. So I'll be very honest, John. Initially, when I went and got the clear scans on my brain and my neck before I got to St. Vincent's. Then I got the diagnosis of dystonia. I wasn't sure what was causing it, because it was difficult to understand it myself. And I knew with the 4-year, we'll say, journey, to be fair with the team in St. Vincent's, looking into all the possibilities of different neurological conditions, that I was very happy to go to London to hopefully get a diagnosis. I suppose the challenge is, what I didn't know at the time is that there was no treatment for FND in Ireland at all when I got to London. And I was then given the opportunity to apply to the Treatment Abroad scheme for more treatment in London. But the reality is, on that treatment, that's 3.5 years ago. And I still haven't started what they call the virtual treatment program for that. So I've been assessed 1.5 years ago for that virtual treatment program in London. And this is the frustration in Ireland, where we don't have a treatment program for those with FND.
Wow, isn't that crazy now, given the amount of people that have it?
And that's exactly what I said, and that's why I founded FND Ireland, John, is I could not believe, because when I got diagnosed with FND in London, I assumed this must be the rarest condition in the world, because I never heard of FND. Then they told me there was no treatment in Ireland, that I would have to go to London. And I said, this is ridiculous, you know what I mean? And I started looking it up myself, you know what I mean? Because I would have got involved in different disability advocacy at that time, because I had to give up my professional career as an engineer, and I moved back to Leitrim. And I realized then that it was so common, but yet we didn't have this treatment. Now, fortunately, we're not there yet, but we've done a lot of advocacy since April of last year, when we launched FND Ireland, and we've been to Leinster House a number of times to present to our Oireachtas members and meet different ministers. And we have got, in the last budget, funding for a small team to join Dr. Aoife Laffin at St. James's Hospital for the first ever FND clinic in the country. But it's a very small step, because what I do is I say to people, if people with MS were told, one, there was no clinic for those with MS in the country, and two, the only clinic that they would have to travel to would be a small 4-person team in Dublin, I don't think many people would be impressed.
Absolutely not. Tell me this then, you've been through a diagnosis. What advice would you give to somebody going through it now?
What I would advise to people is, when you're getting ready for that assessment or diagnosis, is bring a list with you of the things you'd like to ask. Because so many times we go into a hospital appointment, and usually the consultant's asking all the questions, and we come away and we never ask what we would like to ask. So to understand the condition in what I call layperson's language, you know what I mean? So to say, right, this is the diagnosis. How do you, to the consultant, ask, one, how do you think this is going to impact me in relation to the symptoms? Two, where is the best place I can get some support, even though we don't yet have the dedicated FND clinic, but we have got some healthcare professionals around the country with an interest in FND. So really, it's to make sure you don't leave that consultant appointment and have no plan going forward. That's the big. A lot of people, because of lack of a treatment pathway, contact us and say, I've got a diagnosis, but I've actually got no follow-up appointment or support. What can I do?
Can assistive technology be a help for people to live with the condition?
Oh, definitely, yeah. So assistive technology can be very helpful. Because, as I said, FND has a number of symptoms. So in the case of those who would have more severe motor FND, they may have full paralysis of a number of limbs. So let's say they're 2 legs. They may be full-time wheelchair users. So obviously assisted technology in a house environment. And like my own background, being an engineer, I designed my own bungalow when I moved back to Leitrim, and self-built it, but the truth is I didn't do much of the building with my condition, but I directed other people to build it. And I have built in things that allow me to live as independent as I can in my house. And then for others who may have issues with their speech, assisted technology can be very beneficial. So because the broad range of symptoms of FND, it's a matter of looking, I suppose, what's the best fit in that technology for people.
If we get on down to FND Ireland, when did that come on stream and what pushed you to start it?
So FND Ireland was only launched last April, so it's just over a year ago. We actually founded it as a company limited by guarantee in December 2023, so roughly a year and a half ago. So it's very new. And the reason that pushed me to found FND Ireland, with the support of two co-founders, Catherine Cummins, whose young teenage daughter at the time, now just turned to adult age, lived with the condition, and then Dr. Aoife Laffin, who would be the lead neurologist in the country in FND, also supported me as co-founders. And the reason being is that I had gained some experience of being in the charity support sector through a local neurology support centre in the Northwest. And that gave me, I suppose, one, the confidence to go and set up an organisation, which can be very daunting. But I really probably didn't know what I was letting myself in for because of the outpouring of people contacting us once we've launched in the last year, which unfortunately is why we don't yet have a telephone support service, because it's pretty much myself looking after the day-to-day of the organisation. But the real reason for setting up FND Ireland was to support those living with the condition, particularly those in younger life. I'm the wrong side of 50 now. I've been fortunate to have a 25-year career. Okay, it wasn't a full career, but there's many young people I started to find out through my advocacy before I set up FND Ireland who have FND in their late teens, early 20s. And it must be very difficult, you know what I mean, to go through college, into a work environment, living sometimes with complex FND, like any other disability. And the other thing is that there was a lot of stigma around FND. I found historically, when I started looking into the condition, it had numerous names in the past, is many people viewed FND as a condition that had a major psychological input element. So in other words, in the past, you may have had a psychological trauma, and that can still have an impact in developing FND. But when I didn't have any of those kind of typical, we'll say, historical perceptions of FND, I said, wait now, I said, this is a mainstream neurological condition. It's got all the neurological symptoms that I know myself with dystonia and other neurological conditions. And that was really the big thing to found FND, was to support and advocate for those living with the condition.
And what services do you provide?
So at the moment, our services, to be honest, John, would be limited. But we've got 5, I suppose, key areas that we work in. The first one would be support. So what we do there in support is we provide an online peer support group, which we now have 350 odd members in there. We also then do in-person peer support meetings around the country in 6 locations. And we have one in Dublin, local to yourselves, in Blanchardstown. And these are a massive benefit to people, because many people I've met think they're the only person in their local community with FND. So when they meet others, that actually they can share the journey living with FND, and it's not just themselves, it's their families as well, it can be so beneficial. So the other main area we would be working in is advocacy. And that's to ensure we get better services for those with FND. Because as such a small, entirely voluntary organisation, we are not yet, and we don't know when we can grow to the size of an organisation that can provide direct services outside our peer support. The others then are awareness, and that's awareness to healthcare professionals, the public, employers, colleges, information through our website, and we're working on information leaflets, because unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation in the past about FND. And then finally, research. Now, we don't have the resource to do research, but what we do is we support participation in research. So if a university or research institution approaches us, we basically say, yes, we'll advertise that, we'll contact our members and see if they're interested, because I believe research is a massive part of ensuring better treatment for those with FND.
We would always advocate that all charities have a peer support approach because of the shared stories. It's brilliant. Tell us then, do you have any fundraisers coming up?
We do. We literally only became a charity 2 months ago, so we're very new. We actually had our first fundraiser there in April because it was FND awareness, called 5K for FND. So we basically had an opportunity for people to get involved, whether it was walk, running, wheeling, you know what I mean, let's say, be in the wheelchair, cycle, whatever. And what we've done then is we're fortunate to have a small team, and there are a number of young people supporting one of their students who lives with FND, taking part in the VHI mini marathon. So great. We'd love if any of the listeners would like to support us on that team. They can visit our website, www.fnd.ie, and they can just go to our Get Involved fundraising page, and there's a direct link to support the mini marathon team. But also on the website, they'll be able to see the supports we provide.
Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to put out there?
I think the final thing I'd just like to say is, for people with FND, just to say they're not alone. So please reach out to us through our website. We will develop our telephone support service in time once we fundraise more and hopefully get some grants. And just be patient with us. It'll take us a little bit of time. But the thing is, peer support, you mentioned there, John. That's what changed my life. I'll be very honest, because I did not want to know about meeting others with neurological conditions up until a few years ago. I wanted to get better. I wanted to get that medication that was mentioned earlier that doesn't exist, or that treatment. But what I found was, when you meet people with peer support, or with the same challenges, be it FND or be it another condition, it can be so rewarding. I say this to people as a peer support facilitator. I get as much out of the meetings as they say to me. You know, they're thanking, but everyone together. So I would say the one thing is, if you can at all, come along to one of our meetings around the country. And the one in Blanchardstown is pretty much central, you know what I mean, for a lot of people in Dublin.
Eamon, thanks a million for talking to Disability Matters.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.